Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The EU Withdrawal Bill is back in the Commons on Tuesday next week, but MPs will get only 12 hours to consider more than 100 amendments. Let's talk to The Spectator's political editor, James Forsyth. And the government's being criticised for this already, isn't it, James?
Yes, and you've got the Labour Party saying that they might break off kind of the cooperation with the government on the scheduling of government business if they carry on with this.
Right. I mean, in terms of the critical votes for Theresa May, how likely is it that the government will be defeated?
I think the expectation among cabinet ministers is that they might lose 1 or 2 votes, but their hope is that they will lose, that if they lose votes, it will be on the less important votes, so things like the Henry VIII powers, and that they won't lose on, I think, probably the biggest single vote is this meaningful vote that would allow the Commons to essentially send the government back to a negotiating table if it didn't like the deal it came back with.
But there is a group of Tory Remain MPs who are minded, I put it no strongly than that, who are minded to vote in favour of those amendments when they come back to the Commons.
Yeah, I think a lot is going to depend on how many Labour MPs are prepared to either vote with the government or abstain. I think if you talk to senior people in the Tory party, that is what their hopes for getting through these votes is resting on. All
right, James Forsyth, thank you very much. Nadine Dorries, can Theresa May survive as Prime Minister and leading the government if she loses the vote on the customs union in the withdrawal bill?
I think that would be very tricky. I think it would be probably her most difficult days as leader, as Prime Minister, but we're not going to lose that vote. Because, as James has just said, there are, I think, over 70% of Labour constituencies will leave constituencies. And this is one issue which constituents are hugely, highly aware of. And I know that many Labour MPs in northern constituencies who are held to account, their feet are being held to the fire by their constituents, who are holding them to account and wanting them to vote with the government. Now, if those...
What about, though, the group of Tory Remain MPs? Antoinette Sambach was on the programme yesterday saying that she wants Theresa May to keep her promise, to keep as many of the benefits as are possible of single market membership and also to deal with the...
We will not be remaining in the single market.
No, I don't mean just retaining as many of the benefits of single market without remaining in the single market, and the same with the customs union. If MPs like her vote against the government, let's park Labour MPs, how difficult will that be for Theresa May?
It will be very difficult, but, you know, also that the rhetoric has to be very clear. So Antoinette was talking to you about benefits not remaining in the single market. I think we've moved to a new kind of ameliorating position of discussion where I think even the Remainers are accepting it will be impossible. They stood for election. They stood for the general election on a manifesto that we will be leaving in the EU, which meant leaving the customs union and the single market. It would be very difficult for them to come back and to come to the Commons next week and to vote against that. So we are moving to a new level of discussion, and I think this new rhetoric, the nuancing of the words, I think is going to lead to those people that you call the rebels maybe not voting against the Prime Minister, but maybe some of them will abstain.
Okay.
I think we'll have enough Labour, and can I just say, yeah. I think the Prime Minister will win the week next week. I think this will go through, as James says, with 1 or 2 maybe minor considerations.
All right.
But in the substance of the issue will go through well next week.
How perilous is it for the Prime Minister?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is I doubt whether there is a single Labour constituency in Britain where a majority of Labour voters don't want a customs union. So Labour MPs will be pretty well apprised that whatever Nadine thinks, their own voters by and large want there to be a customs union, and actually almost certainly probably want us in the EEA as well.
Right, but she has got a point, Nadine, hasn't she, about the high level 60% of Labour constituencies that did vote to leave?
No, that's absolutely true, but some of them highly marginally by a very small majority, and that was 2 years ago, before people knew what on earth this meant. These were, if you remember, these were back in the days when David Davis was telling us how easy the entire process was going to be, and the war would be over by Christmas. I think a lot has changed since the referendum. The one thing that hasn't changed is that that was the result of the referendum. So now all the war has been about how it is, how you mitigate the malign effects of that vote in June 2016. And I think that's, I would be very surprised if there were a significant number of Labour MPs, any significant number, who were to vote on the government side on that one.
So do you think Theresa May's leadership is hanging in the balance?
No, because they don't have an alternative leader. There isn't an alternative Conservative leader who's somehow going to manage this better. Do we imagine that Michael Gove would find it easier to command a majority in the Commons on this issue than Theresa May would? Who would? Right. Which Tory would?
Well,
is that true?
Well, every party has people in the wings who are waiting, and I think we have people in the wings coming through who are good people.
Give me your best
there is
one,
still, well. So there is still Boris, but I think Sajid Javid is coming through as somebody who's being taken very seriously as a potential leader. But, we don't want that yet. It isn't going to happen yet. We want to get through it. It's not going to happen for some considerable time. And in that considerable time, we do have some very good people coming through. I think that, next week, I know there's a lot of talk about next week and what's going to happen if it doesn't go through at the end. I think have those talks at the end of next week, because I think this is going to go through well. And I think the Prime Minister is going to come out very strong. And I think she's going to go to the Council at the end of the month with that in the bag. But as you say, if she doesn't, then there's a different conversation that has to be had. But I don't think we're going to get to that place. I think everything's going to be fine.
All right, well, you heard it here first. We're joined now by the Polish MEP, Danuta Hübner. She's a member of the European Parliament's Brexit Steering Group and the chair of the Constitutional Affairs Committee. From where you're sitting, not literally, Danuta, but from your standpoint, how is it looking when you view the debate that is going on here in the UK about the future relationship with the EU?
Of course, one can say it's your debate and it's your decision that you will make through the votes as the Brits, as the British Parliament. But we also hope that you take into account the importance of these decisions for the whole process of negotiating and of being on time with the final decision, and also on linking what you are deciding with your vision of the future, with where you really want to land at the end of the whole process. So we are listening, we are watching. We are also sometimes sorry that there is also for Mrs May not only this difficult negotiation as a task between UK and EU, but also that there is this very difficult, I think, internal discussion, internal negotiations, which is probably not always helping, if I can say it this way.
Right, and you're making life difficult. You're one of those, Nadine Dorries, with others, making life difficult for Theresa May.
I think I'm making life very easy for Theresa May. I've been very
what Danuta says about the internal discussion has made it much harder for the Prime Minister?
But there are always on every bill there are internal discussions. Obviously there are more
because
this is a bill
like no other.
Huge, yeah, absolutely massive. Of course, we would not be MPs, we would not be principled people with beliefs if we were not going to have internal discussions in our own parties about the future direction of the government and the country.
But has it damaged the negotiation with the EU?
No, I don't think it is. And so when the Prime Minister comes to Europe at the end of the month, as I said a moment ago, when we've been through the voting next week, there will be lots of discussions. You will read lots of things in the newspapers. It will all be very fractious. Right. But at the end of next week, when it's all been voted through, you won't be saying that then, because she'll be arriving in Europe with the bill in the bag.
Happy that the time was mentioned, because indeed one of the challenges actually from day one of the negotiations was the time, a very limited time for the whole process of negotiating. And now we all hoped that the European Council at the end of June, at the end of this month, will be this moment of truth when we will really know what is the objective of UK, and it will be clarity also on UK side. Otherwise we might not make it by October. So maybe also this vote will be an important factor in finally clarifying also the future vision of EU-UK relationship. So remember, please, about the time. We have it very limited.
Right.
Well, it's imperative.
Yes,
because we need to move on to trade talks. So it's imperative that next week we vote through, because we need now to move on to trade.
And does the EU need to show a bit more flexibility, Danuta, to help that process?
Well, we have to find, I think, a common interest, to identify common interest. And we all talk about the good. You also talk about deep relationship, but then you also have those red lines, which we don't believe are really in the interest of deep, good relationship in the future.
Danuta, I'm so sorry to cut in because we've come to the end of the programme. Apologies. I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon.